Hello and welcome to this short video on knees. So I get asked a lot about knees and knee pain. Why do people feel knee pain? What's going on? What stretches people can do? How they can strengthen their knees. I get asked about modifications in poses. And so I thought it would be a good idea just to come on and give this real basic overview in hopefully what is easy to understand layman's terms about the knee. It's also worth noting at this point in the video that I am not a physio, I'm not an osteo, I'm not a GP. Where I am coming from you is as an experienced yoga instructor. I have over 10 years of experience, and also as a Pilates instructor. And so over that time, I've worked with a vast amount of bodies, including, of course, my own knee issues, pains, and injuries, and I do have them. So that's the place that I'm delivering this this video from. And of course, once you've listened to this video, if you want to dive in and get more in-depth knowledge, that would be where you would go and seek out some of those experts, such as physios. Okay, so why could you be experiencing knee pain? I tend to find that it roughly sits into a couple of reasons. So firstly, it could be to do with flexibility. So if you are a little tighter in the hips, if you can't externally rotate into your thigh bone, so right into that hip socket very well, then what happens is usually the next joint down tends to feel the twist. And of course that would be knees. So it could just be a flexibility issue. In which case, of course, there are stretches that you can do, and I'll come on to that in a second. It could also be muscular imbalances. So what tends to happen is we overly rely on the big muscles in our body, such as the quads, the thigh muscles, instead of trying to switch on those little tiny stabilization muscles, such as inner thigh and outer glute. So again, there's definitely stuff you can do from a strengthening perspective. I'll talk more about that in a second. Technique, form is really important. So particularly in your squats and lunges. So if you're doing a lot of HIIT exercises, this high intensity interval training, if you're doing gym type stuff, we come into squats and lunges a lot. Even in yoga and Pilates, we bring in squats and lunges. So technique there just needs to be really strong and really clear, just to keep your knee tracking well. And I will come up to stand and I will talk you through those two exercises in a moment. And of course, final reason why you could be experiencing pain in the knees, absolutely. You could have a medical condition such as arthritis, and of course you could have an injury such as torn ligaments, tendons. So in this video, let's talk about the things that hopefully you can do for the knee if you don't have a medical condition and if you don't have any injuries. If you do, then of course you would go and dive into those further with your GP, with your physio. But there's certainly things that you can do first before you get a gauge if there is anything more extreme going on. So coming back to stretching, I get asked, can you stretch the knee? What positions can you do to stretch the knee? So it's worth noting that the knee isn't a muscle, the knee is a joint. And of course, the knee sits right in between your thigh and your shin. So when we talk stretches, we're not actually stretching the knee, but we certainly can stretch the surrounding muscles. And if you want to dive into that a little deeper, I won't do that here, but I do have a separate video that shows you a whole bunch of stretches you can do to aid the knee. So quads, hamstrings, hip flexors, inner thighs, outer thighs, all of that good stuff. So there's definitely stretches that you can do to support the knee. There's also lots of strengthening exercises you can do for the knee chances are, if you're practicing yoga, Pilates, HIIT, your gym work, you're going to be doing some strengthening exercises in those classes, such as we just mentioned, your squats and lunges. They're great for strengthening the knees. Unfortunately, they are also the poses that you tend to feel the pain in, but I'll show you those modifications in a second. There are also, again, I've done a separate video on this, a whole bunch of exercises that you can do to build up and switch on these inner knee and thigh muscles, outer glutes, strengthening your hamstrings. So go check out that video where I properly demonstrate some of that work. So let's jump to what I am going to show you today, and that is modifications in your squats and your lunges. So let's come up to stand if you are seated watching this video. So in terms of our squats, feet hip distance apart. Sometimes people teach squats with parallel feet. Sometimes it might be feet turned out. Either is absolutely fine, as long as when you take that squat, your knees track over that second, third toe. So your knees are tracking essentially in the direction that your hips and your toes, your feet are pointing. Bottom is back. Okay, bottom is back. So in the squat, I'm trying to drive my sit bones back in space rather than rock and push the intention forward. Yeah, so the intention of the body is going backwards, sit bones anchor back, rather than knees push forwards. If you think about it, if your knees are pushing forwards, you're really pushing into that joint. So if your knees aren't tracking well, that's going to cause pain. So first of all, there's just that check. Are my knees back over the ankles, and am I pushing that bottom back in space? And of course, it goes without saying, just a little bit of a lengthen through your tailbone and a scoop in through your belly is going to help. For me, when I feel pain in my knees in a squat, I do a couple of things. I don't use weights at all if they're flaring up, so I keep just completely with body weight only. I also take the speed out. So if I'm in a class and my instructor is, trying to get me to power through, but it's a day when my knees just don't feel good, I just take it really slow and controlled. Because if you're coming from a place of slow and controlled, you're able to better work your technique and your stabilization. Yeah, it's very easy to lose the technique if you're powering through something. So take out the weights if you need to, go slower if you need to. And of course, take out the impact. So particularly for my friends, I know I have a number of friends on this page who are my HIIT people, my HIIT friends. And we see a lot of little jumps, jumps and twists, all kinds of things. Take it out. It's just not worth it. It will aggravate if you are prone to those sensitive knees for any of the reasons that we've just discussed. So take your impact out, take your weights out, slow down, check your form. Let's move on to lunges. Lunges are the ones that personally cause me the most pain. And I know from reading a couple of forums that I'm part of that other people tend to feel the same. So let's have a look at a lunge. I'm just going to step that right leg back. And so I keep spine nice and upright. And so a lot of your instructors will guide you to bend that back knee to the floor. Personally, I never do that. I find that's too much for my knee because my knees tend to not stay in their groove, in their tracking. They tend to roll in and roll out. So I just need to be very slow, very cautious with the form. So that's my first tip is, if you're feeling sore in the knees, don't come down too low. Don't come into this extreme range of movement. Keep it really small and just go to the point where maybe you don't feel pain and stay there. As I come in, I squeeze my front glute. So I feel like I've got a little bit of support there. Hips are forward facing. And as I glance down at my front knee, again, particularly, it wants to do this. You'll feel that in your own body, I'm sure. That wobble, this this pose feels a little bit like you're on a tightrope. So it's really easy to lose your balance in your form. So come nice and slow, keep an eye on this knee. And again, just make sure it's tracking nicely forwards. Again, I'm not coming in too deep. And that just might be where I stay. Again, I take out weights, I'd go slow. Also, I wouldn't do these alternating step back lunges. Again, these come a lot in gym classes. You know, you'll come to here, step change, come back. You can even see in my own body, you know, there's a little bit of a wobble going on. It's hard to keep your balance, your form, your stability when you're moving and stepping forwards and back. So chances are you are going to drop into that and not be in a strong, controlled alignment. So if that's you, instead of the alternating lunges, maybe step back, take a moment, find your stability, little lunges, maybe for 5 on one side, take your time, step change, then take the other side. So you could work in a more static way rather than permanently moving. Going back to the same point also of taking the impact out. So personally for me, I never do these jump switch lunges. Can't keep in control of my body in that way. For some people it will be great. For those of us a little bit more delicate in the knees, it's not going to work. So modify there as much as you need to as well. Yeah, so again, just recapping on that lunge, keep your hips forward, don't go down too deep, push strongly into the earth with your feet, switch that glute on as you come up. Yeah, again, no weights if you don't wish. So just coming back down to cover kind of the summary points. So if you have knee pain, yeah, why could it be? It could be tightness in the hips, muscular imbalance, poor form. All of those 3 you can do something about. You can stretch the muscles around your knee. You can do strengthening exercises for those tiny stabilization muscles. You can modify going slower, taking out weights, taking out jumps, etc. If you've done all of those things and you're still experiencing knee pain, then now, of course, is the time to go and check with an expert, go and get them looked into a little more. But hopefully this has been useful in terms of just that overview, okay? Just that overview. Do check out the videos that I have that are specifically stretching the muscles around the legs, specifically building strength. Give me a comment if this was useful, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for listening.